Hi, thank you for attending our event. I'm here today to talk to you about our new startup, BiasProof, biasproof.com. We're here to combat unconscious bias. We believe that the first step in overcoming bias is to understand your own biases. BiasProof believes that everybody wants to be a good person. I think fundamentally we all want to be better people at heart. But a challenge is that we're not very good at judging ourselves. And sometimes a little objectivity can really go a long way. We certainly don't want to be the people saying we're the least racist person in the room. Generally, that person may not actually be the least. So we've created a tool to help you measure your own biases. Now, what are these biases? Sometimes people call it implicit bias or unconscious bias, but it starts when you're young. And we're really kind of trained into it. It's really not our fault. But if you think about it in the context of movie villains, for example, villains in the 70s, mostly black bad guys. If we go back further, it was cowboys and Indians, where the Indians were bad guys. In the 80s, we switched over to Colombian drug lords, if we think about movies like Scarface and shows like Miami Vice. In the 90s, it swapped over to Russian gangsters and failed Russian states. When we switched over into the 2000s, it started to be jihadi terrorists. Fundamentally, if you grew up in this environment where the bad guys on TV were one group and regularly that same group again and again, you start building biases towards that. You can't help it. It's not your fault. We only think that it's your fault if you're unwilling to change. If you actually acknowledge that this has happened to you and you don't want to change, maybe then you're part of the problem. We think that the first step in positive change is being aware that you have a problem. The minute you can accept that you may be part of the problem, you can become part of the solution. And it doesn't matter who you are, what race, ethnicity, gender, any type of classification you may find yourself, you may have biases towards other groups. The second you put yourself into a group, then there's people who aren't in your group, and you by definition tend to have biases. That's okay. It's natural. The question is, can your awareness drive change, and can that change create a better society for us to live in? At BiasProof, we think that it starts with measurement. One of the challenges that we see is that corporations are trying to deal with implicit bias or unconscious bias by training people. And that's great, except it becomes a challenge because some corporations are already talking about the fact that it's very difficult to measure the impact. Well, that's why we created BiasProof. BiasProof is about measuring that impact. And we believe that before you start training people, it's better to measure their own biases and allow them to do that privately and come into training thinking about their biases and knowing what they are. Once they can recognize that, like the old saying goes in Zen, if you realize you have a problem, a teacher will appear. We believe very strongly in that. Once we show you a problem, you're not just sitting in this boring training, you're actually trying to address an issue that you realize. So we believe very strongly that you should test first and train afterwards. So our approach is measure your biases. Right now we have measurements for gender, ethnicity, and weight-based biases. We will be adding more as the months come on. Then we will offer training. Right now our training isn't up as of, I guess it's March 10th, but we do expect it to be up by mid-March, all of our training to be complete, and for you to be able to do our quick training course. And a reward, which is we're going to give you a bias-proof certificate and a bias-proof badge to put either on your website if you're a corporation or on your personal LinkedIn that shows that you've completed our certificate course. Our overall goal is positive change in the world, and we believe that positive change happens when people start addressing issues. So our product is very simple. It's a mobile website that allows you to complete the test on your mobile. We believe that this is very important because you're not using your employer's computer. You can do it in the privacy of your car, at home, anywhere you like, and out of sight of other people. Because this is a personal thing, you should be able to do it personally. We also use a methodology called privacy by design. We don't track your name, and we do not store your personal information. You do it on your mobile and only your mobile. Your score is absolutely private to you. We don't even know who you are once you've taken the test. If you're taking the test as part of a company, we only aggregate results. We do not show individual people's results. Our whole goal is to get the world thinking about biases, not to shame anybody, not to name anybody. So we have two different offerings. The first is for consumers. It's free. Take the test. We hope that you'll post on LinkedIn that you have. You'll add us as one of the courses you've taken and be part of the positive change. For corporations, we've made it quick and easy. It's very affordable, and it allows you to track change in your organization by testing people before training. And then we recommend for everybody that they test themselves, preferably every 6 months to a year, but at least once a year, so you can see your progress and make sure that you're doing things right. And you're not also gaining biases, because we can do that as well. We think that this is the right way around. Once you do this, we recommend that you just take a subscription if you're a corporation, or just come back annually if you're a person. We'll give you a badge that you put on your website, as I mentioned, or on your LinkedIn profile. And enjoy, share. And most importantly, by putting this label up, you're telling other people that you've addressed it, and hopefully this will start a movement. We'd like to create a global movement where people are testing themselves and becoming more aware of their biases. We don't believe that unconscious bias can be solved in a day. We think it's about knowing your thoughts and catching yourself making these assumptions. If you make an assumption and you're aware and you say, wait a second, I just thought that, it's really important, and it shows that you're on the right road. We don't think that equity means that everybody is equal. We think that equity is that everybody is treated fairly. And our goal is to create a situation of fairness in the world. So if you believe like we believe that it's time for change, then what we're hoping is that we all change a little bit. And if we all do a little bit of change, then that causes the whole world to change. We'd like you to start by measuring the change by going to biasproof.com and trying our free test. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks, Stuart. And we've got Stuart Sherman here now live from Toronto, and I'm live at Leeds. I've got a couple of questions just to explore a little bit, and then we're going to have a tea break for everyone at home. So just tell me, so we're dealing with really sensitive subjects here. We're dealing with how people feel, how they respond, but also giving people data so that they can act on those difficult conversations and questions that we have. So tell me a bit about how you manage privacy by design or privacy by design.
So it was very important for us. And actually what's interesting is that the birthplace of GDPR actually was in Toronto with a woman who is a good acquaintance of mine, Anne Kabukian, who wrote a book called Privacy by Design, or because she's Canadian, Privacy by Design. And we took this very much to heart, because with Bias Proof, the actual product is a test and training to help you deal with your unconscious biases. And we can have unconscious biases, and the challenge with them is that they could be viewed as thought crimes. You know, an example I love to offer is I'm involved very heavily with the emerging Black community and the Black Opportunity Fund and things like that here in Canada. And that doesn't mean that I haven't been programmed from a relatively young age by society, by TV shows and movies and things. So if I'm walking down a dark street by myself at 1 a.m. And a large Black man walks towards me, I will be naturally more uncomfortable than I would if it was the same size woman, white woman. This is a subconscious bias. It's not something that I choose, and I'm certainly not racist. However, the challenge really is that fact and the level of my racism or sexism or any of these things, if they were public, would be horrible. And it would actually cause me to not want to be tested in the first place because I could be shamed. And secondly, it would make me very uncomfortable if my employer had access to it. So we thought about this as we were designing Bias Proof. And we realized that if an employer was going to implement Bias Proof for their company, they would need to upload a spreadsheet full of email addresses so that people could be invited to take the test. We didn't know how it was going to happen at the very beginning. And we said, okay, let's manage it ourselves so the employer could never see and never know the results of an individual. So that's actually why we decided that the employer would actually upload a spreadsheet and we would manage it. Then what we do is we actually tokenize every single person that we send an invitation to. So we actually know that an email address was given a token and that token was used for a test, but we can't tie the results of that token's test. So it's no longer human, it's a piece of code, like a serial number. Yep. And we can't reverse engineer that serial number, but we know that it took a test and we know it completed the test or the training or combination, but we cannot reverse it and we can't make that score available to even ourselves or the employer. And by doing that, we hope that we've created an environment where people feel more confident because there's privacy designed right into our system. The challenge that we had is, imagine if employees thought that their staff would be able to see results. Sorry, employees, that their managers or bosses would be able to see results. So we've thought about this, and we think that there's probably a lot of organizations that are collecting data that don't actually need to know the person at that level. And we've run into this at Bias Proof's parent company, Scaled Insights, where data's been collected by university researchers and such like. And because the data isn't fully anonymous, they have trouble doing future work with that data and trouble understanding and crunching that data in other contexts because it's not anonymous data. So the same researcher could go and harvest data from Twitter and know everybody's address and name and handle and everything else and do a very large study. But if they knew the people and they'd actually collected it themselves, from individuals, university ethics would not allow them to do certain things with it. So these are concerns that we have. And I think that it goes beyond our company and into all businesses where you start wondering, what information could you anonymize early on and therefore ensure that you don't have information problems later?
Yeah, and that's really important. That's really important. And I think it's more, it's data rights as well as privacy. Have I got rights over my data and how you use it and how we protect that? But it's an emerging science and practice, isn't it? And I think the more we share between each other, the more we can get people to trust what we do.
Absolutely. And I think that there's big conflicts and issues that people really haven't started thinking about. But, yesterday, if you were using Microsoft and Microsoft Teams and things like that, you may have noticed there was a worldwide outage and all sorts of problems associated because Microsoft got hacked. Well, you start talking about this and start saying, okay, so what are you doing with the data at rest? And companies will do things like encrypt the data at rest. Like when I say that, I mean the data in their databases and things like that. But if that data gets out, like think about the organizations like Equifax that got hacked and the damage it caused to the value of that organization. Now imagine that Equifax was a startup or some relatively young company. They were badly damaged financially after that hack. Had they anonymized, and of course they couldn't in their business model, but had they kept the data anonymous and the data was hacked, it would be just interesting information. So you start wondering when you're setting up a startup, what data can you anonymize early on and therefore protect yourself? Because you can never be like, if Microsoft gets hacked, it means that you can never be unhackable.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I agree with that. And you know, the more your data becomes more valuable, the more it's connected, and making it more connectable, I guess, or easily remixed is part of the process. And if you put barriers on it early on by making sure by connecting individuals' data to it, that you're locking up lots of value rather than trying to release it. Yeah. Okay, Stuart, it's been fascinating to have you. Unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap up a little bit quickly because we've got to go for a 10-minute tea break. So, yes. Stuart, thanks live from Toronto. It's been amazing to have you, and we'll have you next time on Northernlands 4.